Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Decryption and I hope you are well. So, a few weeks ago we did a video on top 10 tips to become a better game dev. Just little tips and workflow things you can add into your workflow, how you work in Unreal, just to make it a little bit nicer for yourself, a bit easier, a bit faster in some cases. It was fairly popular, so I figured we'll do a part 2, so I've got another 10 tips to help you become a better game dev. Let's get started. So just like before, these aren't in any order, they aren't ranked in any specific way, it's just a list that I wrote down ideas as they came to me, and we're going to go from there. So getting started right off, tip number 10 is pure functions. They don't make any difference to the code whatsoever, but it makes it look a little bit neater. So I've got this function library here, full of different functions for my faction control system, so I can say which factions people belong to and stuff like that. So this faction here takes 2 inputs, it does a bunch of stuff, and then tells me an output of what I need. Right, dead easy. If I come and open up, say, my medical card for whatever reason, or the vehicle, apparently I click that one. If I come in and I just type the name of this function here, find faction relationship, so you can see if I come and do find faction relationship like so, it looks like a normal function. The in and out pins, it's got all my details like that. So if I come in and say I go debug key 2 to add a debug key in, and I simply want to print off the factions relationship, so I'll say, I don't know, print out the relationship, whatever, something basic like that. Now, I have to connect this function in the middle of here like so, which is not too bad, and it will work, but there is a nicer way you can do it. So if I come and disconnect this faction relationship, come back to BPFL factions, I can click the function and tick the pure option. If you've got something you need to specifically call the function, say it doesn't export anything, then you kind of need the exec pins to tell it to run it. But in this case, I want to pass data in and receive data out. And I'm going to be using it in another exec sequence like so. So now I can just add this function in. I can pick whichever factions I want. Let's pick the Paladins and the unaffiliated. Boom. It will tell me. I've not had to connect it into my pins. I can also promote this value to a variable if I need to, and it works really well. Another instance where this works is in my get faction relationship right here. I use it here. I need to connect it down here and get the data. So instead of having to connect it in the middle here, which you can see where it used to be, it can now be nicely sidelined. Something minor, doesn't affect the performance at all, but it helps. It just looks a bit nicer and makes your code feel nicer. So the next thing I want to talk about is a very can be taboo subject. Don't be against plugins all the time. Plugins can be a huge time saver for you. Some of them, fair play, you might want to create it, you might want the fun of doing it. You might have something really specific you want. Go for it. Maybe you're really, really good at what you do and you don't need the plugins because you can do it your own way specifically to you. Fine. But in some cases, plugins can be the night and day of your project. So for example, years ago, I always tell this story. I used to use the Unity engine and I wanted to create my own quest system. And when I used Unity, I was trying to create my quest system. I was highly inspired off of Grand Theft Auto and I was trying all the different bits to do it. Then I ended up moving to Unreal. After months and months of working on this quest system, I moved to Unreal and I restarted learning Unreal. So I moved to Unreal. After about 6 months of learning Unreal, I needed a quest system, so I started working on one. I was working on this quest system for nearly 3 months, and it had a lot of things I needed on it. But then, the way I laid it out meant that I couldn't do optional side objectives. So if I wanted to do this or this or this with a main one, I couldn't do it. And it basically just made my quest system have to be completely rewritten, which I wasn't happy about after 3 months, as you can imagine. So I started to see Rube's video on creating Simpsons Hit and Run, and it was showing off his plugin. And at first I was like, no, I can create my own one, it's fine, I don't need it. But it was on offer, it was like £50 at the start, when it first came out, on discount. And I was like, for £50, and the offer's a full refund, let's check it out. 2 years later, I'm using the narrative plugin in every single project I do. It saves me so much time. And it's got everything I need in it. It's been worked on for years. So instead of me having to work years to get to that level and then create mine, it's already done. It saved me years of time. And now I can drop it into any game And then within a few hours, I've got dialogues, I've got quests, I've got tasks, objectives, optional objectives, everything I could ever want. Now, this isn't saying every single plugin you buy is going to be perfect. Unfortunately, you're going to buy some plugins, they're going to be terrible or not for you. It just is a thing, it happens. If you've got a good plugin developer, most of the time they'll offer a refund. So if you don't like it. I liked the Unreal's basic sky system. I'm not an artist, I don't know any better, so I figured, okay, why not? Everybody always raves about the plugin Ultra Dynamic Sky. I don't need it. The Unreal's one works fine for me. I saw somebody on stream using it. I asked the question, why? Why do you need it? Why can't just use Unreal's one? And they started showing me the power of this plugin. And this isn't a promotion for Ultra Dynamic Sky, this is just Unreal's doesn't have it. A plugin. It would have took me ages to do this, so I wanted rain in the game. This plugin comes with rain. It comes with thunderstorms, snow and everything else. It's super easy to get set up and working, but it would have took me months, maybe years to get to this. I'm not an artist. Imagine if I'd hired a contractor to come and make this. Narrative, at the moment, the quest and dialogue system, which has now been renamed to Tales, that costs £300 to buy currently, which seems an insane amount for a plugin. It's not going to make your game for it, right? Imagine how much it'd cost you to sit if you were charging yourself even £10 an hour, £5 an hour. It'd take you years to get to that, way over £300. Ultra Dynamic Sky, I think that's £35, or like, $40, $45, something like that. Imagine how long it'd take you to get all of the artistic experience you need to create it with all the properties and everything you need, all the sounds, all the effects. It'd take forever. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. If you want to learn it, do it. That's the biggest way you can learn. Jamming loads of plugins into your game isn't going to make it at the end of the day. But don't be so dismissive of plugins. Plugins can be good and they can save you a long, long time to make your game. So tip 8, the next one we're going to talk about, is localize early. And this is something you often see a lot of people do when they're making a game or they're on a game jam or whatever, and they want to have different languages in the game. So you might see on this medical cart here, say if I wanted to give it a name, so I know, if there's like 3 of them, it could be medical cart 1, medical cart 2, whatever. I could come in, I'll give it a name. Programmers, they use strings for everything. Every other language uses strings, right? So I'll click compile and save. I'll come in, I can now give it a name. So I'll say this is medcart 1. And that's all good, right? So how do we localize that value? So now we can make it Japanese, we can make it Chinese, German. How do you do it? This is why I'm saying localize early. So strings are not localizable. You can't translate a string. You can build your own solution to do it, sure, but using Unreal's, you can't translate strings. So Unreal actually has 3 different versions of what a typical conventional programmer will call a string. You have a name, a string, and a text. So as the descriptions say, a text is localizable. So you can translate this in Unreal and it'll do it all for you. So if I set this to a text, compile and save, if I click it, you can see it's got this flag next to it, which means it's localizable. So you can click it and you can set up your localization, which I'm not going to get into in this tutorial. It's dead easy to do, though. Like, there's loads of tutorials, it takes 10, 20 minutes. But you can now set it up, and then whenever you change your language in your game, I think it's the culture override, every single text will now look at this table and pick the correct language to be used. So if this is medcart 1 in French, maybe it's Licart 1, I don't know French. But that's the key. Localize early. Start thinking about what you set things to. Ironically, I almost never use a string because I don't see them as useful for storing data. Printing stuff out to the print string, sure, it's dead easy, it's just debug code. But strings are just for non-translatable text, really, things you don't want to translate. Names, they're a bit different in Unreal. They are for looking properties up. They are basically an indexed string. So if you've got a data table and you want to search down all the names, it will be a name data type. So localize early, think about your localization, and then end of your game, when you've got to localize the game, it's all set up for you. Very minimal will need to be done. So one that I saw on a YouTube video the other day, if I remember, I'll put it on the screen, that if I don't, just remind me, I'll try to find it. And it's when you're dealing with animations, if I come to my animations here, quite often when I'm doing something, say with the motion capture stuff, I want to copy values between them. So I'll open this one up, and then I copy a value, and I want to paste it on this one, and I want to do it a few times, so I'll open this one up. But it'll just overwritten my tab. I don't know why this is Unreal's default setting, because nothing else works this way. But every time I open it up, same with animation montages, it will replace the existing one for some reason. And it's really easy to fix. So if you go to Edit, Editor Preferences, and search for Animation New, or go to Content Editor's Animation Editor, you've got this flag here, Always Open Animation Assets in New tab. So if I tick this one and save it, just so it saved it, now every time I open an animation, it'll always open it in a brand new tab. How cool is that? Now, there is a performance drawback to this. It's because all three of these are going to be running at the same time, look. So you're going to be having 3 animations running, and your FPS is going to drop. That's why it's probably set by default, I'm guessing. But I don't know. Just be careful opening loads and loads and loads, because then you will get a massive performance hit. But now I can copy values between this animation and this animation really, really easily, because I can just switch between the tabs, like so. How cool is that? So, tip number 5 is looking at is something you very, very commonly see. And I almost guarantee you've probably done it yourself, because I've done it as well. And it wasn't until recently when I was working with a client when they pointed it out to me. So, say if I have a key in here, debug key 1, and I want something to happen, so it say, it prints out aiming, and then I want them to wait for a few seconds. So I'll come in, I'll add a delay, and I'll say 2 seconds, I want it to wait. And then after the completed, I want to come in and say, fire. And then it fires, right? Dead simple. Pretend this is an NPC. You've got a few 50, 100 of these NPCs all running this code. Start the game, take over the car and press 1. It'll say aiming. It'll wait for 2 seconds and then press fire, right? I can press it. I can move around, aiming, fire. Okay. However, one thing you may not know is if you've got loads of these hitting delay, you're actually temporarily freezing the thread of Unreal to actually make it run. So if you imagine every single game engine runs on a loop. It's got to run on a loop, because if that loop stops, the engine will exit. So as soon as you start the game up, it will run a loop over and over again, telling it to render the editor, render these nodes, render this, blah, blah, blah. Huge amount of rendering. I click onto this node here, it needs to highlight it, it needs to render this new thing. It's a big loop, yeah? When the game's running, that same game loop, which you may have heard of, is still running as well. And these delays hold up that specific loop. So as it's looping into your game, it hits a delay, it will branch off that delay and run some other code on the side, but it's that specific thread is waiting for that delay to run. If you have 100 delays, your game's gonna lag, because all of the usable threads have now been taken up and it's got to wait for the delays to finish. Of course, I don't want to kill my Unreal, so I'm not going to test this, but if you do, please let me know. That sounds quite entertaining. But there are better ways and to still achieve the exact same functionality, because a delay node is fantastic. There are just sometimes you have to wait for a few seconds to do something. It just is. But there's a better way of waiting, and that is the timers. Now, when I first started Unreal, timers were the most confusing thing ever. They were so overly complicated, a delay node just works. But then I found a tutorial, I can't remember what it was, years ago at this point. It's just broke it down and it's so easy. So if I want a timer that calls this here, I'm just going to simply drag off instead of delay, and I'm going to do set timer by, and you've got a couple to use, event or function name, or you've got next tick, some other stuff like that. I'm just going to do by event like so. So my time is 2 seconds. The event, I'm going to drag down here. I'm just going to do add custom event, and now I can plug my fire into here, like so. And that will now do the exact same thing. You don't even need to add a custom event here. What you can do is if I have a custom event over here called firing NPC, say if you've got an interface set up or something, that's fine. Connect it there. From this event here, I can either connect it over there, I can just type in create event like so, and it gives me this little box. Now I can come and pick my event, firing NPC. And you might think, well, the delay's a timer and the timer's a timer. What's the difference between them? You can see, I'm just running, aiming, it's all fine fire. But the difference is a delay holds up the current thread, and then every other thread has to go somewhere else. A timer adds itself to Unreal's timer system and waits for it to be called. So that's got its own thread somewhere already. So if you've got one thread dedicated to timers always running, what's the point in blocking other game threads with delays? There isn't. You may as well queue it to the timer system, which checks all of this every single time for every timer in your game and calls it. It's so much more performant. Doing the odd delay here and there, you'll not notice anything. But if you can implement timers when you've got a lot of delays or just whenever you can, it makes it a lot easier. And don't forget, the final thing is you also do have set timer by function name. On this, you literally just type in the name of your function. I don't know why you have to type the name, you just do. So if I come here, type a function called fire for NPC, come back to my event graph, this function name needs to be that exact same thing. So fire for NPC with all the capitals. You can't reference a function from another blueprint. If you want to do that, create a function in here or an event that calls that other function, and then this time it just calls the local one. Timers. So I'm actually going to switch back to my main map for this next one because we need quite a lot of space to show this off. Now, one common thing that you often see with older games is you'll see NPCs just disappear in the distance. And as games have got better and computers have gotten better, this has been practically taken down to nothing now. You don't really ever see it. But it doesn't mean it's not there. The fact that they disappear at a distance on older consoles is for performance, because if it's rendering that NPC or that blueprint, then it's taking memory up. It's taking CPU to run what it does. It's taking GPU to render all its meshes. And in old games, they'll disappear at a distance. As computers have got better, this distance has massively increased. On Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, if you whack the render distance all the way up, you could see basically almost over to the other side of the map, because hardware has gotten better now. So here's a prime example. This NPC here, this shopkeeper, if I press G to activate game mode and start zooming out, I can still see him. Well, that's okay, I might want to see him that far away. I'm all the way over here. Why can I still see that NPC? It's not going to matter at this point. What about if I come all the way over here? He's still there. If I hold the C key, you can see he's still there. But I'm all the way over here. I can't physically see him at this point. But he's still taking memory up. Why? So one quick fix you can do, if I zoom back to my NPC, is if you open his blueprint up, so I'll go to my ALS NPC, and then if I come to the class defaults and search for max distance, you will see we've got a bunch of different ones here, but I'm specifically looking at the level of detail. At what point should we just rendering this model? It won't destroy it, so all of its AI logic, it will still kind of work. The animations won't play though, they'll be cut off. The NPC their mesh won't be rendered, and that's what we want for key optimization. So I'm going to set this to something like, we'll just do 1,000 for now, and I'll click compile and save. So if I press the G key, now you see I'm in game mode. As I start to zoom away, so I've just quickly added an NPC in because this one's already got a plugin to handle optimization. But you can see here, I've done the same thing. Desired max draw distance, press the G. As I move away, she will eventually disappear. So you can see 1,000 is not a lot at all. So if I come and set this to something like 10,000, seems a lot, but as I get further away, you can see eventually she will just disappear. Pop, there you go, she's gone. At this distance, do you really care about that? If you do, change it up a little bit more. You don't want to set it to anything silly, like that windmill all the way over there. I don't know why I can see that. I just can, but that's a static mesh, so we'll ignore that. But you can see right there, as I zoom out, if I hold the C key and zoom in, you can see she has absolutely gone. She's vanished. But as I move closer, she will pop back into existence. There you go. And if you want to know how I'm zooming in and out like that, it's the Z and C key while you're holding the right mouse button down. So you can see she is disappearing and appearing. And this is a small tip you can just set on most of your blueprints that will instantly speed up your optimizations for everything you need. Now, I have actually technically got a plugin in that I alluded to a moment ago called NPC Optimizer. It's a paid plugin that I got for free from Epic. NPC optimization component like that. This basically overrides that max value thing that we were setting and gives you a bunch of different settings to actually set waves of what will happen. So on this one, I can come in and say at 1,500, it will activate these settings, which in my case will still activate physics. It will still run everything they need. it'll still show shadows and everything. But as I get further away, so say if I get to 3500, the third wave, you'll see it's now going to hide the shadows. So this character here, if I zoom out, so you can see as I run away here, can I one up here? Yep. Eventually his shadows will actually disappear because I've got so far away from him that NPC optimization has clicked in and removed his shadows. It works based on the player's location rather than the camera like Unreal does, but you can kind of see he's going to be acting more basic now. His shadow's still there for some reason. That might be an ultra dynamic sky thing, but his animations have severely now limited themselves. So you can see his breathing, it's gone down low in FPS, I'm far enough away. It just optimizes the game quite a bit. So the next is one that's recently exploded all over the internet, which is actually very, very good. I've put my own video out about it, countless other people have, so I'm not going to focus on it too much here, but use interfaces for connecting things together. It massively reduces the memory footprint of your game. So often you'll see a game online, you'll download it, it's an early access game, you'll load it up and it'll instantly spike up it wants 16 gig of RAM already. You look at it and you think, AAA games don't even require this, what's the difference? So you can see in my video here, what I previously did, I'm showing you when I cast to a metahuman is gigabytes compared to what it needs to be, because it's simply referencing something else via casting or some other way. There are better ways. And now on this part of the video, you can see where I've changed it over to an interface and it's barely using anything. So you've saved essentially nearly 2 gig of RAM because that metahuman doesn't need to be loaded in all the time. It's super, super nice. Definitely look up interfaces. I'll put my video in the description. You absolutely need to learn it. The last tip I'm going to show you is one that, frankly, I was told recently and I didn't really know what it was. But there's quite a lot of controls in Unreal, so you're often forgiven for not really knowing what they do. You just know they're there, but you never use it. And the one I'm going to be looking at is the hide unrelated. So if I come to my event graph here and I say click this set movement mode here, if I tick hide unrelated, you see everything's going to grey out. But why is it greying out? And what it's doing is it's showing you nodes that are related to the one you've selected. So this one here is related to this one, and because these are connected and these are connected, all of these are connected as well. So you can see as I click them, it will show me whichever bits need to be highlighted to tell me what's going off. So if I come up here and I select this node here, click hide unrelated, you'll see everything's going to be greyed out because this function is only really connected to these here like so. If I click this function here, everything's going to be now highlighted. And it shows you nicer in the editor. Like if you've got a complicated blueprint, let's open up my jail cell here. If I tick hide unrelated and select a node, this branch here, you can see I don't need to worry about any of these anymore. I've just got this here. So if you've got a really long blueprint and then you're looking at this node here, you can click it. You can now zoom out and see in colour everything it's linked to. You don't always need it. Sometimes you might not need it. If you keep your code clean, I'd argue you don't need it at all, to be honest. But sometimes your code just gets messy or it gets testy, you know, it gets to where it is. Hide unrelated just helps. You can just see things a bit nicer, a bit clearer look. So like this one here, these two are connected technically by the timeline, but according to this node, it doesn't need to know about it. How cool's that? So thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I hope these 10 tips helped. If you have any more tips, please let me know below. We'll create a big playlist of tips to help everybody learn. Thank you for watching. My name is Decryption and I will see you next time.